Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Hello and welcome to Date Forever. In this week's episode, we're chatting about the role of sex in relationships and life, sex education and enjoying sex for pleasure, and overcoming slut-shaming. But before we jump into that, Sammy, what's been fueling you up this week?
This week, I did something very humming householdy, getting organised.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, so I do a few things. My life is made up of quite a few different building blocks. So I have like my personal life, my freelance consulting that I do, Fuel Collective, our podcast, my other business, and then my job as well. So I have different inboxes and calendars for all of those different areas of my life. Sometimes that's a great thing. Sometimes it's a little overwhelming. But they are all necessary. And last week I went in and gave a couple of them a real deep clean. And it felt good to just feel like I was getting like back on top of a couple of things that I'd definitely let get out of control. Yeah. So it's a bit of a lame one, but it's definitely felt like a good reset, and it got my brain firing about how I can have these different areas of my life probably working a little bit more cohesively together. So I'm excited to make some few changes over the next few weeks. Yeah. What about you, Nath? What fueled you up?
You know what? Mine was almost identical to yours. So
Hey, you say that every week.
No.
I think you just copy my notes.
No, I didn't. This is completely independent of yours, but I managed to get my work inbox down to 11 emails, and like I cleaned through it and I went back, and I think this is about like it's probably like 8 or 10 months worth of emails that had backed up, and I had finally had a little bit of clear space in my calendar to be able to actually go through my inbox and clean it out, and got down to 11 emails. So I was pretty stoked when I was able to do that.
Sorry, everyone, this is super boring. Maybe we've just got preemptive spring clean energy.
Yeah, maybe we do. Yeah.
A few weeks left of winter.
Yep, ready to get rid of winter.
Ready to shed the layer and clean things up.
Yeah. On that note, let's jump into this week's ep.
Today we've got Carly Cykiert joining us. Carly is a clinical mental health counsellor and sex and relationship therapist. She is currently working towards her doctorate in clinical sexology. She loves talking about the uncomfortable, especially on her podcast show, Comfy with Carly, where she makes the uncomfortable comfortable. Her dating life has been full of adventures after learning as a teenager that sex can be just for pleasure. She's had her fair share of heartbreak, toxic and abusive relationships, but while the world was shut down, she finally found her partner on Tinder. Welcome to the show, Carly.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to chat with both of you.
Hey, it's great to have you here.
We appreciate you because we are in drastically different time zones. So thank you for showing up for us.
Not a problem.
Hey, so my hunch is that someone who finds themselves in a mental health and sex and relationship field had an experience that brought them there. So I would love to know, how did you get interested in this field and how did you end up as a mental health counselor?
Yeah, so that question's kind of twofold, the mental health counselor part and then the sex and relationship part.
Let's do the mental health part first.
The mental health part, yes. So I had some mental health issues pop up when I was in college, university. I'm not sure what.
Interchangeable.
Yeah, perfect. And if it wasn't for some of the mental health providers that I had, I'm not sure that I would have necessarily been able to get through the experience. I was a freshman in college, the transition, I think the fact that I was studying so hard and I wasn't seeing the results that I wanted, and just the hard part about being away from school hit me, and I was experiencing depression and anxiety, probably more extreme than I did in high school. In high school, it was 2006 to 2010. So mental health was not really talked about the same way it was now. So I was experiencing depression and anxiety, but I thought everyone felt this way. I thought the amount of like nerves that I felt or the anxiety I was feeling was just normal. And everyone was feeling that way. But when I got to college was when it really started to hinder my life. Fast forward to me being a professional, I worked at Planned Parenthood as what they call a healthcare assistant, a medical assistant. And I found myself wanting to provide beyond what I was capable of doing. It felt unnatural for me personally to help these women out or help these individuals out. And then be like, okay, thank you so much for telling me, I don't know, this is a example, your partner cheated on you and you're here to get checked for STIs. Thanks for letting me know. And I'll let you know if anything comes back normal. It just felt like I needed to be doing a little more. So that's why I applied to my program. So both that personal and professional experience. So yeah, that's the clinical mental health part. The sex and relationship part you kind of touched on. Human sexuality has always been an interest of mine. In high school, I apparently told people I wanted to be a sex therapist, probably for shock factor. I don't know what it entailed. I think I was just being that person. And the more I reflected on what sex therapy and relationship therapy had to offer, the more it was, okay, I understand this. Sex is messy. It's authentic, it's confusing, it can be for pleasure, it can be a traumatic experience. There's so many different ways to look at it. And I felt I only got one way. And that wasn't anyone's fault. It just was how it kind of was back then. My parents gave me the sex education that I needed at the time. But sex can be pleasurable. And just because I enjoyed sex, I was labeled a slut in high school. And now come to learn, at almost 30, hey, you can have sex for pleasure and be safe about it. And it's okay. And who cares? So being able to destigmatize exploring your sexuality, whether that mean your identity and experience, your relationships, just kind of all that encompasses human sexuality. So being able to be that for someone, to destigmatize what that really means.
Yeah. So we touched on in your intro that your relationship life and your dating life has been a bit of an adventure. So did that start back at kind of high school, like with some of these sexual adventures?
Yeah. The first boyfriend I would consider like a serious boyfriend was in high school. And he taught me a lot. And to this day, I'd still consider him a friend and we keep in touch here and there. That I think I put sex at such a weird spot in the priorities in relationships in high school, because here I am understanding this can be for pleasure, but people are also saying you're supposed to have this intense connection and be really into the person. And you only do this if you're in a relationship. And so that was something to navigate when I was going through relationships as well. And I handled relationships very immaturely for a while because I was exploring my sexuality. And I think that was hard for people to understand at that time, at that age.
I think this is such a big thing for teenagers to really explore what sex means, what relationships means. And like you kind of touched on, the sex education, it comes in all different sizes and scales and depending on who that's taught by, whether there's a religious background to that as well, whether it's taught by the school that's very black and white about like certain things.
Penis goes in vagina, ejaculate, make baby.
Yes, exactly.
Very clinical sometimes. Like everybody's sex education is different, and it can really, shape the way that you think about sex and relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And it varies so much also, like you said, by school system, how your parents were taught their comfort level discussing sex. If your parents or whoever is the person teaching you about sex isn't comfortable talking about sex, it's going to stay very like you were saying, penis in vagina, ejaculate, make baby. So that's also the other thing. And then when it comes to the school systems teaching it, it depends what state, it depends if it's a private school, public school. There's all these regulations, there's can and can'ts of what you can and can't say. And then who's teaching it? A health teacher that also is doubling as a gym teacher and probably is just as comfortable talking about sex as the parents we were just discussing. So yeah, sex education, it comes down to a whole lot. And my partner and I have had a lot of conversations when children come into play, how to have those conversations. And I said, our kids are going to be like either the weirdest or coolest people, depending on how you look at it, because they're going to walk around and they're going to know all of the parts, and they're they're going to know age appropriate content. And one of the things I learned in my program by Dr. Logan Lefkoff is age appropriate content doesn't have to do with how old you are. It's how you present it. So you can be teaching your kid about sex, sexuality, and the parts the whole time. It's how you present it and the context that you use and the information that you use when talking to them. So, to not talk to your kid at age 5 about parts when they're starting to play, I don't know, doctor. So yeah, it comes down to a lot of your comfort level and your education as well.
Yeah. I mean, like I've got full spectrum of friends who are still very uncomfortable with the word vagina or vulva or penis. And then I've got like other friends who will just, full vocabulary of words to describe their genitals or their partner's genitals. And there's like, some of them have energy that's really loaded around those words and others it's just not. And you can see the level of fluency and comfort talking about their body, their pleasure, what they enjoy, what they like, what they're willing to ask for, what they're willing to say no to. There's friends who will only have those conversations after a couple of drinks. And then there's friends that will call you up and be like, oh my God, guess what we just did?
Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about. My friends are the same way. And as I have become, actually before this, which was probably part of the reason I was so interested in becoming a sex therapist, I was that person people were going to for relationship advice, for dating advice, for sex advice. And now even more so, I think it's, okay, I need to call Carly and tell her about this experience. And I so appreciate it. But for some people, like you said, it takes a few drinks. They have to loosen up a little bit. And for some, it's just very natural to talk about it.
Yeah. So I'd love to go back to something that you said about being a teenager and figuring out that you were enjoying sex and you're enjoying exploring these new experiences. But you mentioned that you'd been labeled a slut and that slut shaming word and behavior. I'm really curious to know how that's influenced your relationship with yourself and your relationship with sex. And have you been able to sort of shake that belief or that stigma?
So I think it's followed me around in that those who don't know me on a personal level anymore, probably when they hear my name, I will be like, oh, in high school, she was this way, or in college, she was that way. And they don't really know that much about me, or they know very surface level things. So impacting me now, I notice that maybe there's some social events that I don't necessarily care to go to. I don't interact with these people. Like my high school reunion was sounds weird to say, I got lucky that my high school reunion, that's how I feel, was canceled because of COVID.
Yeah.
And aside from, I just don't see the point in going back. I just thought about all the things and what people were saying about me. So I think it's something I'm still trying to shake. I think in high school and with dating into college, it definitely affected me. I think I allowed people to kind of, I don't want to say take advantage, but I definitely allowed sex to be up on a higher pedestal to a lot of things. So if you showed you were interested in me and you were flirting with me and you were showing me you were sexually interested in me, that was something that, because everyone else was like, oh, she's a slut, I kind of took into, I guess, mindset, oh, well, if everyone else thinks I'm a slut, who cares? Meanwhile, I was being safe about everything. I was doing everything that you would hope someone would be doing if they wanted to explore their sexuality. And Yeah. So all of the positive behind everything that I was doing was so it was really casted in the shadows towards what everyone was saying. So it's something I think I'm still working on. And I self-reflected just now in the middle of the night with both of you. But I think it's something that I've been able to reclaim as society is starting, the anti-slut movement, and people are starting to acknowledge like the sex positivity movement. There's so many movements that are getting behind this. And that's allowed me to be more accepting too. I had some partners, one of my partners who we talk very, very occasionally, probably shouldn't be talking at all, one of my past boyfriends, and he could not get over that I had sex with X amount of people and that was more than him. So it's affected some relationships when the other person isn't able to kind of see how this just was a part of my life. It wasn't a big deal. That's kind of just how it was for me. It was experiences. It wasn't anything that needed to be more than what it was.
Yeah, this body count, sexual experiences thing is such a weird tally thing to be keeping track of and communicating with partners. Like Nathan and I got together when we were so young and we knew each other at high school and we dated afterwards. But like I could probably write all of the names of all of Nate's sexual experiences. Like that's how intimately we've known each other for such a long time. But I do know that this is an interesting thing to have to navigate with a new partner who you're moving into a more serious kind of relationship with, or you're starting to see long-term intent, especially if one partner feels like it really matters and the other one doesn't. So I love your point of view on this. Yeah.
I think there's a few factors, right? What do you define as sex? What would you put in your body count? Is sex just penis and vagina penetration? Is it oral sex? So I think that makes a difference too. If body count, if this is something that you feel is important to you to know about your partner, if you feel it's something that is important for your partner to know, having those conversations of, okay, well, what do you consider needs to be in my body count? And then
Which
why?
is an interesting question in itself, right?
Yes.
Like, does hand stuff count?
Exactly. Yeah. And you'd be surprised, right? And it turns out my partner is a very big believer that it's part of your past. It's okay. Kind of like me. You were safe about it. I know everything that I think I need to know. And there's no reason for me to know everything. We have never talked body count. The conversation obviously comes up because we've been together 2 years. So the conversation with other people, like, oh, you've never talked about how many people you've been with. And we're like, no, what does it matter? And so I think finding out too why it's important to you or your partner. Like, why does it matter to you how many people your partner has engaged in sexual activity with prior to you? And for a lot of people, it comes down to, well, I need to know for my sexual health reasons. Okay, yes. But do you need to know body count for that? Or do you need to just know your person has gotten tested and
they're healthy?
Exactly. So that's kind of how I would recommend navigating it. When it came down to me personally navigating it with my ex-boyfriend who wasn't okay with it, we were never going to see eye to eye. It didn't matter if I said, this is who I am counting because this is what I count as sex for me. It didn't matter. Is the number was higher than his, and that's all that was able to register.
There are so many issues in that, right? Like there's so many things for him to unpack in that. Like, why do I feel like my number should be more than hers? Why does it matter that like there's so many things, right?
And this is the one that I talk to very infrequently and I really should not talk to anymore. It's probably the therapist in me that keeps him like unblocked because I'm like, oh, well, if he ever needs anything.
No, Carly, cut it off. Just cut. Yeah. We're going to hold you accountable, all right?
I appreciate that. And I know all my friends would too.
Take your own advice. I'm sure you'd tell your friends the same things and your clients.
He does not recount conversations similarly as I did. So he, when he reflects, doesn't think that that was a source of conflict for us, which is fascinating because I'm willing to bet it's been a source of conflict in other relationships with him, because who cares if your partner has slept with more people than you?
Yeah.
So yeah,
I think some of that is like whether or not we want to acknowledge it or not. But I do think there's an element of like that purity culture, religion, saving yourself for marriage. Like even if that's not something that you subscribe to, you have been exposed to messaging and language that kind of implies that. And you see like that sex is something that happens between a man and a woman, and they're deeply in love and they're making a baby. Like you've seen narratives around that, even if it's not something that you consciously believe. So I think there's so many things to challenge here. Like even just dropping the language of like losing your virginity, like that's such a weird language to use, because you don't actually lose anything. You gain a sexual experience.
Yeah. One of the things they actually taught us in our program is the language is shifting. And I've never seen it anywhere else other than this like one class, to sexual debut rather than losing virginity. For that reason, you're not losing anything. And it's such a heteronormative, right? Very has to be man and woman to lose your virginity. Well, where does that line get crossed if you're not having sex with someone of the opposite sex or gender of you?
Yeah.
So,
if losing your virginity means being penetrated by what? Where?
Exactly. So it's interesting you say that, and it helps people kind of reclaim it too. Like it was my sexual debut. It sounds very interesting and like awkward to say because we're not used to it. But for that,
I'm into it. I love it. I'm here for it. Sexual debut. I had a first experience. It was like first time riding a horse, first time having a sexual experience.
Exactly.
Sexual debut.
It's your most sexual experience that you feel is significant to you, that really started it all. And who's to say that has to be like penis and vagina?
Yeah. So Carly, I'd like to change gears a little bit. Tell us a little bit about your Tinder relationship and your global pandemic relationship.
I'd love to. So I had been with a ex-boyfriend for quite some time, kind of on and off. And I had decided I was ready to start dating after that. I'm not even kidding. Beginning of March 2020, I had decided I had downloaded Hinge and I had downloaded Bumble, and I was going to give just those two a go because I didn't have any more capacity in my life to dedicate to those. And then the world shut down. And I said, okay, well, if I'm sitting here swiping on these ones, I might as well download some other ones. And Tinder being one that doesn't have a great rep, I was like, all right, I'm, sitting here anyway, I'll just download it. And after, of course, weeding out some very interesting conversations, as you can imagine, when you tell people on dating apps you're a sex therapist, you get some weird and inappropriate comments. I found Eric, who is my boyfriend partner now, and we started very casual, moved it off Tinder, and all of our dates were FaceTimes for about 4 to 5 weeks. It started like with a very cute kind of exactly what everyone was describing when people were dating in the pandemic. We did like an activity. I'm going to say we watched a movie. I really don't remember, over FaceTime. And we really got to know each other. We did it all complete opposite. Like to this day, we just reflected, we've never been to a movie together, never stepped foot into a movie theater. We can now, we just haven't.
Yeah.
And it allowed us to dive into the really deep things pretty early on. So we were having conversations. He had also been in a serious relationship at one point in his life. So we knew what we were looking for. We knew what were deal breakers. And we were kind of able to have all of those deep conversations that you might not have until, if you're going to count, like, and I'm using air quotes, date rules, right? Till date 3, 4, or 5, because you don't want to scare the other person away.
What was the worst that happened? You scare them and then you just hang up the phone.
Exactly. Right. And I had been on other FaceTime dates, and I said to all of my friends who are still dating today, like, that's the way to go. I was able to tell, because you can tell to an extent. over FaceTime or even a phone call, whether you're feeling it or not, whether this person is giving you a vibe that you are into, whether you're like-minded. And I was able through FaceTime to like weed out some people that just weren't for me. And I was like, had I done this in person and done this the way I've seen like my friends do, because that's all I really had to model, how exhausting that must have been. I don't know that I would have stuck with it the same way. How easy to be like,
because really
barking, I gotta go.
You can, and the safety of like, I'm meeting a stranger for the first time. Like you don't really have to leave you couldn't at the time leave your house. Like, and you could probably have like 4 or 5 dates in one evening if you really wanted, right? You don't have to transit anywhere. Just be like, hey, like I've really enjoyed our conversation, or thanks, this was nice, but nice to meet you. Best wishes.
Not to mention the added benefit of like only having to get ready from like ways with all other Zoom meetings we've had. So it was really wonderful. It allowed for, I think, a really deep connection that wasn't there with that physical. We had like a space between us. Then when it came time, okay, we've been doing this long enough. We're both being very safe, talked on the phone for 2 hours. And now it's kind of funny because it's so our personality to debate for 2 hours, whether we were going to meet in person or not, whether this was safe, what we
are we legally doing the right thing, navigating all the rules. Is this worth the risk? So stressful.
It was. And my mom there's not much for us to do because a lot, the world was shut down. So then you have my mom, don't let a stranger come to your house. And I'm like, but he's not really a stranger. I've been talking to him, for 4 weeks through FaceTime. And she's like, but he's still a stranger. And I hear that. And I ended up inviting him over. So I heard her and
made your own risk assessment.
Didn't listen. And it's interesting. He walked in the door and the first thing he did was kiss me. And, we've had so many conversations. I'm like, what compelled you the first time you ever met me in person to walk in my front door and just kiss me? It wasn't 2022 then, but like, you got to be careful. You can't just do things and not ask if it's okay. It's not really something we had talked much about because I actually didn't feel I was ready to have sex with someone yet. The relationship before the breakup was kind of surprising to me and left me feeling very heartbroken. And I was ready to date, but I didn't know about that part yet. And not to mention COVID kind of freaked me out. And he just said, like, I just knew it was right. And I'm like, well, you did the right thing, but you're lucky. It was
it was a gamble.
I was like, I easily could have said, what are you doing? And get out of my house. And that could have been it. And we have just ever since. It's been great. Like I said, we've done a lot of things backwards. So we're just starting to do a lot of the date things that you would actually be doing in the beginning. And it's strengthened everything. It's allowed for such raw conversation to happen, both in person and through FaceTime. It's allowed us to both really be present. There wasn't many distractions going on. So we weren't distracted by everything going on at a restaurant where we couldn't talk about certain things. When we were sitting down and we were FaceTiming or having these conversations because there was not much to do, we were able to be very present. Not to mention, and this has nothing to do with the pandemic, he's just wonderful. His communication, our communication, I'm going to give us kudos here because we had to figure each other out, but it's all just set right in. We have so many small world situations, like we were meant to meet. And it just happened that Tinder is what brought us together during a pandemic.
Yeah. Wow. So you said you've been together coming up 2 years now. So tell us, like, what are some of the practices and habits and rituals that you've got in your relationship to keep it fueled up?
Yeah. So one of the things is, regardless of what our plans are for the night during the weekday, he does travel right now. So he's gone 2 nights a week. When he's home, we always end the nights together. We will watch at least one episode of something, even if that means he falls asleep on the couch, which is usually what happens. We always end the night together. we live both different and busy lives. He works very much a daytime job. I'm a therapist. I have evening clients. So sometimes that's 9 p.m. And like I said, one show and then we're in bed. I think that's been really helpful. It allows for connection at the end of the night. And then one of the other things, like I said, we're really good at communication is having those conversations when we're not distracted. So I think that's also allowed for the connection to stay there because when there is conflict, we're both present and we're able to have that conversation and have that intentional space. I talk about that a lot with my clients and in my life. So I think that's been really helpful. And we've been making an effort, and this is an effort because we started, like I said, opposite, meaning we're very used to sitting around and doing nothing together and being content, making that effort to be dating. Like, okay, we're hitting that 2 years. This is where everyone kind of gets comfortable and stops going on dates. Well, we need to start going on dates. So that's also been there, making the effort. Like, we haven't been on a date night in a while. It's time to reconnect and acknowledging that. It probably helps that I'm a relationship therapist, so I'm hyper aware of when we need to connect again.
Yeah, that was going to be my next question. So with the time that you spend as a relationship and sex therapist, like, is there something that you would like to share with us for couples in the first few years of their relationship, something that they should put some energy into mastering to serve that part of their relationship and keep it fueled up?
Yeah, I think, like I just said, creating intentional space to have conversations, whether that be to have a conversation about what you're doing over the weekend, to have a serious conversation, to resolve a conflict, to discussing what you want to do in the bedroom. And this is something I've been talking about with couples is a lot of people have issues having what I call sex talk. And that doesn't mean dirty talk. It means wants, needs, consent, kind of everything that goes with sex. And so with couples, don't allow yourself to just get stagnant. If you're not satisfied in your sex life, if you're not satisfied with the dating, if the communication is not there, set a time to have that intentional conversation, intentional space with your partner. The worst is to try to have an important conversation with someone and their mind is elsewhere. So by saying, hey, is now a good time to talk about this? Or I have something that's really on my mind. Most of the time you should probably tell them what it is because, hey, do we need to talk? Or I have something on my mind can spark anxiety for people. But that would be my biggest piece of advice to keep it going is once you have that foundation of creating intentional space, you're able to keep doing that in all aspects and really be present for each other. It's so easy to not be in today's world.
Yeah, I really love that advice. And I know that one of the things that works well for us is actually going to a local cafe or something to have some of those conversations because it is so easy to be distracted in your own space. Like, you've got the washing on, I'll just go and do the dishes while we're having this conversation and not be fully present and things like that. So I know, one of the things that works really well for us is just going and having some intentional time on a Saturday morning or something to, get away, get to a cafe and have some really good chats.
I love that. Yeah. Not only do you set that like time and the mindset of the intentional space, you also get yourself into the home is not necessarily a neutral place, even if it's both of your home.
Yeah.
Like you said, it's very easy to get distracted, to find things to add into the conflict. Like if, I don't know, I'm not as great at picking up after myself. I know, and my partner's never said anything, but I know it drives him crazy. So I'm sure if we were in like a conflict situation, he'd look around and something I left on there's tons of stuff I've left around. He'll look at it and that will be brought up. So I think I love the fact that you get out of the house. So it's not just a mindset for the two of you, but an actual physical intentional space as well.
Yeah, it's working really well for us lately too, because we moved totally different areas, maybe like 5 months ago or so. So we haven't been to very many of our local cafes and restaurants and stuff. So we've been making a really conscious effort, not only to have this couple of hour ritual. It's not even, it's like hour and a half, 2 hours max, including the walk there and back. But we're taking it in turns to pick a place. Like you pick one week, I'll pick the next. And we're trying to go to coffees and a treat of some kind that we share for $20. So that's kind of like,
2 coffees and a treat. And that's kind of what we've been calling it. So yeah, but that was like an organic kind of ritual that arose. Like we already had habits around getting out of the house and having intentional time together. But this one is like a really nice thing that's working for us at the moment.
Yeah, you should keep a list. I know our goal, who knows if this will happen, is to come to Australia for our honeymoon. And it's something like right away, I was very honest about it. It's on the list. It was there beyond like anything I've had for my wedding. It is a goal. It is happening.
Come on over. Come stay with us. We'll hang out, have a bottle of wine.
Start banking your PTO. We're going. And we love local and like coffee shops and places to look around exactly like you're talking about. So you should keep a list.
Yeah, come on over, Carly. We'll show you around. Put Sydney on the list.
Yes.
Hey, this has been a really nice chat. Thank you for letting us have a little peek behind the curtains about your journey with your relationship with yourself and your sexuality, but then also a little bit about your profession and what you help couples with, and then some of your own relationship. So before we kind of close out, have you got like one last idea or something that you'd like to share?
Yeah, don't be ashamed to explore yourself. And there are people around you that feel similarly that you do, and you just have to find them. And thank goodness that it's 2022 and we're becoming more open about talking about sex and sexuality and gender identity. But I promise you, you are not alone. If you are someone who is being labeled a slut because you enjoy sex for pleasure, those people will figure out eventually that they also enjoy sex for pleasure. You're just going to get it sooner.
Or they're doing it wrong and they need some help with that.
Yes, exactly. And if you're one of those, you can find me and I can help you. But yes, you are just someone who's going to get the benefit of enjoying sex for pleasure for longer of your life because you figured it out sooner. Be safe, make the decisions you need to make for yourself, and know that you're not alone.
I actually have one more question. If there is someone in a relationship, or if there's 2 people in a relationship and one of them is more comfortable and fluent talking about sex, their body, what they want, what they need, what they requests that they would like to make, and the other partner has difficulties or is like, whatever you want, babe, like any of that kind of stuff, has sensitivity to receiving feedback or any of that kind of thing particularly around sex. Is there an activity or something you can recommend to help sort of build that muscle and get more comfortable having uncomfortable conversations?
Yeah. I think one of it would just be continue to have the conversations. The more you do it, the more comfortable it gets. And I think checking in with yourself. So it's not necessarily something you can do with your partner, but checking in, what about this makes me uncomfortable? Why am I unable or feel so uncomfortable expressing my needs? Is this just something sexually that I'm having trouble expressing? Is this in general? And I think being very patient with yourself. It is hard to do uncomfortable things. And when you sit down and you're making that choice to even have that conversation and that goes outside your comfort zone, be kind to yourself and be proud of yourself that you even sat down to have that conversation, and just keep practicing. It gets easier. Eventually it gets funny. Eventually, you and your partner will find a way to talk about it where if, every time you say the word penis, it makes you cringe a little bit because that's just how you were raised, that you don't have to say that word anymore. You and your partner will get into a groove, and allow your partner, if you're the one who feels comfortable, guide the conversation. You're the comfortable one. You're aware your partner's not so comfortable with it. Take charge, take lead, ask some questions, open-ended questions. That's the way to get the dialogue started. And if someone's not comfortable, right, acknowledge it. I acknowledge you're not comfortable right now. Like, do we need to take a break? We don't need to have this conversation right now. I don't want to force it. That would be the tips that I would give.
I love that. Hey, Carly, thank you so much for joining us and having a chat. To say thank you, we've provided a student in Indonesia with a week of classroom education. So thank you so much for making that possible. But the cool thing about that project is that often girls don't get to go to school in Borneo. So this project specifically helps girls go to school and get that education. And then we know that when girls become women who have education, it has an incredible ripple effect for their community, for their country, and for the world. So Thank you so much for being part of this conversation and helping us to do that and impact all around the world.
I love that. And thank you for making that part of your podcast platform. That's a very unique thing to do and definitely something that is needed, the opportunity to have these call to actions and to bring light to the issues going on.
We believe in education. So thank you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So Carly, if people want to connect with you or learn a little bit more about sex or relationships or what you do, how can they do that?
Yeah, the best way to do it is to follow me on Instagram. That's at Comfy with Carly. Very easy. Carly is Carly. And you can also check out my podcast, which is Comfy with Carly, surprise. And you can listen on Anchor, Spotify, or podcast. And you'll learn a lot of different topics there. My Instagram is the best place to reach me personally, though.
Yeah, awesome.
Amazing.
Thanks, Carly.
Thank you both so much.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.